You made $150K last year, over $150 an hour, and you're still making these massive mistakes. Let me tell you why that's actually a great thing. This is Jonathan. He's about to graduate college and he's betting on himself to go full-time in poker. And I'm Mark. I've earned over 7 figures playing cash games, not by playing like a GTO robot, but by punishing real mistakes. Jonathan's already beating 2-5 and 5-10 in Texas, but after graduation, he's moving to California where the pros are tougher and the edges are thinner. Today, we're breaking down the leaks he can't afford to bring with him because Texas made him a winner, but California is going to test whether he's ready to be a crusher. All right, Jonathan, over the last 12 months, what is your total profit looking like?
It's right around 156,000, and that's doing a little over 150 an hour through 997 hours.
Pretty good results so far. So can you tell us a little bit about your poker goals?
Yeah, so I'm going to be graduating in about a month, and I'm going to start playing full time after graduation. So I'd like to play another 1,000 hours in that second half of the year once I start playing full time, and I'd like to maintain that hourly over 150.
So games in California might be a little tougher than the games in Texas. You concerned about that at all?
I think it's definitely going to be an adjustment, but I think finding the right games and playing enough, I think I can do it.
I think you can do it too, but there's definitely some leaks to patch before we get there. So let's jump in, let's try to find these leaks, and let's try to get you ready to crush for $150 an hour in California. Sound good?
Let's do it. I'm excited, Mark.
So this one we're playing 2-5. A player opens in the cutoff. You decide to flat here because there are 2 fishy players behind in the blinds. Both of the fishy players come along. A whale in the big blind donks for 80 into 120. Walk me through your thought process here.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's using a little bit bigger of a size, and that's going to indicate a stronger range. There's a lot of 7x. He can definitely have like some of those weaker overpairs. He's not going to 3-bet out of the big blind very often, so he can still have, 8s through 10s, maybe jacks, and then definitely some flush draws in there, but I don't really want to raise against that range. He's definitely a whale that's not going to be folding, especially a 7, so I kind of just want to call and try to hit my hand, and if I do, I think we're going to get paid in a big way.
I'm on board with this, and we are going to call. We're going 3 ways to a turn. Look at that sweet baby there. Now he checks. The cutoff checks it over. Walk me through your thought process on this turn. You decided to bet 300, pretty big bet, into 360 here.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of my size. I think it's leaving a lot of money on the table. When we've established that his range here is going to be over pairs and 7x primarily, we can pretty much rule out those flushes because he wouldn't have checked the turn. That range is just never folding. If he has, 8s with a club, never folding. If he has a 7, it's never folding. And I think we can bet egregiously large, just set up an easy river jam. And I think I missed that here.
I want to pull up a different example here. Let me walk through this because I feel like a lot of people hear me say, well, I like to bet small on these flushing kind of nut changing turns. So let me show you the difference here. This one, just to be simple, we're going to open on the button and the villain's going to call on the big blind, and we're going to c-bet on the flop. He's going to call. And now here on this turn, when we make the flush, this is the spot where I like to go small because villain is uncapped in this particular spot. So by betting small here, it gives the villain a chance to raise their smaller flushes to put in more money for us. And when they do have kind of a weak range, maybe hands like pocket 5s or pocket 4s with a club, gives them a chance to call with those hands. But in this example, going to be much different, right? Because this guy donked on the flop for a large size multi-way. Now on the turn, he checks. So that means 2 things. Number 1, just like you said, he has a very strong range on the flop. Now he checks on the turn, so probably not going to have a flush. So in this situation, our villain is capped, but they are relatively inelastic because they have a strong range. So you ended up going 300 here on the turn. He called. Now on the river, you decided to go 600 and you got the call. So my preferred line here on this turn, I'm completely on board with what you said. I would just go for the big boy over bet, 500. The biggest size that this guy's going to call with a hand like pocket 9s. 7x is obviously never folding. We want to make sure a hand like 8s, 9s, 10s doesn't fold either. I think 500, 600, somewhere in that vicinity. And the really nice thing about this big turn bet, we just don't have a ton behind on the river. We just go for gold against 7x. This guy's never folding a 7 in a million years, or else he would not be a whale. By going 300 on the turn, 600 on the river, I think we just missed a lot of value here.
Yep.
All right, this one we're playing 10-25. We open pocket 7s from the low jack, and a friendly whale in the big blind is going to call once again. Flop, he checks it over. You just decide to c-bet range, which I like. I'm on board here, around half pot. He calls. Now on the turn, which is the most innocuous deuce of hearts.
Obviously, we don't have like super thick value, but against this player, especially when he comes along out of the blinds like this, he just has worse hands like 6x and 4x. He can have club draws, and I think our hand, obviously we still lose to a queen and, some of those middling pairs as well. I think it's still strong enough to bet for value and potentially get 3 streets out of on on the right runouts.
What are we going for 3 streets against?
6x and 4x. I think we can get a chunky street out of those on the turn, as well as the flush draws and the straight draws. If he has a 6 or a 4, I feel pretty comfortable getting a 3rd street out of it.
Okay, so you think this guy, if you go bet, 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 is just not folding a hand like ace-6?
Yes. I also think the nit game was on in this hand, and that makes me even happier about this.
Size, you decided to go here on the turn, 400, so you went pretty big. But if this is the type of player who's not going to fold a 6, if the nit game's on here, if this guy's not going to fold pocket 5s, he's not going to fold 4-5, ace-4, something like that, well, he's sure as shit not folding on this turn if you bet 500 or 600, right? So just choosing the bigger size here, again, just missing out on some value here. If the guy is like not going to call half pot overbet with 6x, which may be reasonable, right? Maybe he doesn't call like 3 big streets. The other consideration here is possibly, if we are against a slightly more aggressive player, is checking back on the turn, is if he does have a flush draw, he's going to bet on the river, right? We get the value, we get 2 streets from the flush draws anyway. And if he does have a 6 or a 4, he probably checks on the river, and we could probably still go 2x pot and still essentially get those 3 streets against the 6x and 4x. If he comes out and bets the river for pot or 2/3 or 3/4 or whatever, well, we just know with pretty high certainty that he's probably got a queen or a hand that beats us, and we can just get away from it. So by checking back on the turn, we kind of have this clairvoyance. Basically, we can overbet the river when he checks against 6x and 4x, bluff catch on the river when he bets half pot or 60% pot, which he's going to do with his flush draws. When he comes out and bets the river big, it's just going to be heavily weighted towards queen X, and we can just fold and get away.
The other thing I was thinking about is that, when he does come out and bluff with those flush draws on the river in this line, the size that he ends up bluffing for is not going to be anywhere close to the size that I could probably bet for value on the turn. But I also think it's worth noting, the information we get out of his bet sizing when we're against queen X.
We win a little less against the flush draws. Bad players are going to be transparent with their sizing on the river. We just don't lose money to the queen X. If we're going to go for this line of like, hey, this guy's not folding his flush draws at 6x, let's just bet 600 on the turn, right? Let's just go bigger.
Yeah,
what happens on the river is you get the best, maybe the best river in the entire deck. Like, you could not ask for a better river. This guy checks it over. You decide to go 600. Walk me through your thought process on this river.
My thought process was pretty much, what's the size that gets called for sure by those worst pairs, the 6x and, maybe the ace-4, the 5-4 type hands. I think that's just a error in calibrating how much that's actually going to call.
Yeah, Jonathan, let me ask you have jack 10 of clubs on this river. What size are you betting to get 6x or ace-4 to fold?
If you put a gun in my head and told me I had a jam and get that hand to fold, I'd probably not be very happy about it.
Yeah, we could probably at least at the minimum be going like 1500 here. If we size up on the turn just slightly with the 7s, we can get in all the money on this river possibly. Working that inverse question, making sure you're forcing yourself consciously to ask that question on every river decision, I think is just, that's gonna help a lot. All right, this one we're playing 5-10, open ace-6 of spades. We're gonna get called in 3 spots here. Flop comes 8-7-4. You decide to check with multiple players in position to you. I like that. Next to act, stab 60. Walk me through your thought process when the other 2 players fold and this player next to act has stabbed 60 here multi-way.
Yeah, so I think his range here definitely is, it can be some top pair, 10-9. It can be pair plus straight draws like those 7-6. Going 60 into 170 is a little bit weaker, but I think we could be failing to account for, since it's multi-way, they may size down a bit, even with good hands. I'm looking to check raise and try to start a bluff against 8x and those pair plus straight draws that are not going to fold, or at least check raise and evaluate and see if I pick up equity.
If you were heads up in a pot and a guy stabbed for 2/3 pot on the flop and you had this hand, would you be comfortable check raising? Yes or no?
No.
Why?
The bigger size indicates a stronger range that I don't really want to bluff.
Yeah, so what I will say here is that the more multi-way we are and the closer they are to next to act after you, the stronger the range is going to be. A small size multi-way in this configuration is probably equivalent to a big size heads up, because this guy just stabbed next to act when the small blind is uncapped and the cutoff is uncapped. He's got multiple players behind him who could have strong hands, and he's still stabbing here. This is not going to be a spot that's really monkey stabbed, and when they choose a small size multi-way, I would just treat this as like a medium or big size heads up.
If this board had a flush draw, would you weigh into this size more so where like they will feel more incentivized to protect their hand with the strong hand?
Yes, for sure. Let's say this board is somewhere somewhere between static and dynamic, maybe moist. This board is not the most dynamic board. 5-6 is going to be the nuts on most turns. I would say this board is a little bit more static than most of these low boards. The more static and the more dry the board, the less players telegraph their strength with their size.
Sure.
And this board's a little bit more on the static side. Okay, so what ends up happening here? We check raise, he calls, pick up a beautiful turn, and like as played, I think your jam on the turn is just fine. Even if we are against a range that's sometimes sets, sometimes straights, then the occasional like 8x, pocket 9, some stuff like that. The more equity in our hand we have, the less fold equity we need. When you pick up like a mountain of equity on the turn, we don't need to get folds like all the time to have a profitable jam here. But I would just say like be a little more cognizant of check raising players multi-way on the flop, even if they choose a small size, especially when the board is a little bit more on the static and dry side than the wet and dynamic side.
For sure.
He calls, and what do you end up having here?
He has a set.
Had a set.
I think it's sevens.
Sevens. Makes
So
sense.
we were just, we were kind of cooked from the start.
All right, Jonathan, let's talk about this one. We need to talk about it. 5-10 and a reg or pro in the small blind, gonna raise to 45, and we defend in the big blind here with king 9.
Yeah.
Walk me through decision point 1, because I'm already wanting to throw my computer out the window.
I understand why you do. I mean, I already think his bigger size pre is indicative of him trying to exploit me, thinking I'm not going to fold to him. And, he's thinking correctly. We should just fold this hand. We decide not to.
Yeah, he's intentionally sizing up, it seems like. He knows you're going to call too much, like you said. We're playing against a pro, and yeah, we are in position, but we just have a card disadvantage here. The way to exploit this is just to massively overfold, and then when we do have strong hands, just 3-bet really big.
Yep.
Probably just going to fold this one pre-flop. Flop comes ace 9-5. He goes 70. You elect to call. I think calling is fine, even though he chose a big size on the flop. We've got second pair. We're in position. We can see what he does on the turn. I wouldn't beat yourself up too much over the call on the flop. I think the turn is where things kind of go off the rails, besides pre-flop.
On the flop, what do you think about raising?
Yeah.
Because I'm looking at his bigger size as I think it's a lot of ace-x, and I do think we have the option to start turning our hand into a bluff now. I'm just curious what you think about that.
If he has a hand like ace-king on a deuce turn, what's he going to do?
He's not folding.
Okay, but what's he going to do? If we call on the flop, what's he going to do on the turn?
He's going to continue betting.
And what looks stronger? Us calling the flop and raising the turn a river, or us raising the flop?
Sure, it's that delayed gratification of, raising later on.
If I did happen to have a hand like pocket 5s, ace 9 or something like that, I may just raise the flop right now, because I think the flop raise kind of looks full of shit. We just don't have much value here. I would just call. I would just flat here with all of our 9x, 5x, those type hands, and if we do decide to turn it into a bluff. Because the thing is, with 9x, we could still be good some of the time, right? He could just have a hand like queen jack suited or something like that that's just going one and done here. And so the really nice thing about calling with this hand, if he checks the turn, we can just check back. We have the best hand a lot of the time. And if he bets the turn, now we can raise and get him to fold ace king, ace queen, ace jack type stuff by the river. Turn is a 9, and at this point he checks. Walk me through what you're thinking.
When we have value like this and what we want to target, it's going to be ace-x, and I think the ace-x in his range that does decide to check is the weaker ace-x, maybe ace deuce, ace 3, ace 4, those types of hands. And so I think there's merit to sizing up on the turn now, when those hands will call once, and then they'll evaluate.
Jonathan, hold on, we got to be congruent here. He went 4.5x pre-flop, remember?
Yes.
Is that the size that ace deuce goes pre-flop?
That's a good point.
Also, I want to walk through, why might he decide to check? What does he think of you? Does he think you bluff too much or give up too much?
He thinks I bluff frequently.
So why might he check here if he has a hand like ace king or ace queen?
He wants to induce a bluff.
Yeah. And also, if he just keeps barreling here with ace king or ace queen, what is he getting 3 streets from? Ace 8, ace 7, ace 10, something like that, I guess. I think he may be checking here with his really strong ace x. I could be off base, but that would be my assumption.
No,
because
I think
he
that's
probably
true.
Assumes you decided to go 100. Walk me through this sizing.
I think he could have had some of those stronger ace-x, and I was kind of in the moment hoping that he would check raise them, which is very poor thinking, because he's checking to induce a bluff. He's not checking to check raise if he does check those hands. So I think my bet accomplishes very little, because there's not really much of his range apart from maybe he has queens that I want to keep in with this size, but this size accomplishes nothing.
Let me ask you this. If he has a hand like queen jack or jack 10, what's he doing no matter what here on this turn?
He's folding if we breathe on.
So is his range more capped or uncapped on this turn?
His range is capped.
Is he more inelastic or elastic?
He's going to be inelastic with the hands that continue.
And when they are capped and inelastic, what size do we go?
We go with the big size.
If you could redo this, what size would you go on this turn?
Yeah, I think if we're looking at his range that we're targeting being ace jack bluff, I think we could get away with maybe 400 or 500. It's the spot where he thinks he's checking to induce. And so when we have value, we just want to make it. He's going to think I'm using a massive size to bluff. He's seen me do it before plenty of times. So it just makes perfect sense here to bet massive for value.
Jonathan, gun to your head. You have a hand like 7-8 here. Are you triple barreling? How do you feel about getting him to fold for all the money?
If the range that we're looking at is strong ace X, he's not going to fold once we go massive bet and jam the river.
Yeah, so what happens here is we go 100 on the river, we go 275, we get called, and we are good, of course. Here's maybe the sizing I would recommend. All right, on this turn, just like you said, 400, 500, pretty good. Ace X never folding. We get to a river, and we've got 1.4x here. Just put in the money. Just put in the money. I mean, I think we're missing egregious amounts of value in this hand because once again, like, how do you feel with 6-7, 7-8 on this river?
I feel awful with those hands.
So if you're not going to bluff for this size, you know what to do with the value. All right, next one here. And this one, there is a hijack open, cutoff call, and we decide to squeeze in a small blind with ace-8 of hearts. Walk me through decision point number 1 here.
Already we're looking at, their opening size, and I think with stronger hands, they do bigger than 3x, even in these. I think this was straddled as much as 5-10, and so, when they only go 30, maybe since it is straddled, not as big because the pot's getting bloated already, but I think the smaller size is not the strongest range. I do feel reasonably confident squeezing a little lighter, and this hand is fairly light from the small blind.
Are these players opening too wide or too tight?
I think overall they're opening too tight.
If they're opening too tight, are they opening worse ace X?
Probably not.
Yeah, so if they have a hand like ace 10 suited, ace jack suited, ace queen offsuit, what are they going to do when you squeeze?
They're going to call.
The thing is here, when we squeeze, especially from out of position, we're just going to see a flop so much. And if they're opening too tight, it means they're probably going to be calling the squeeze too much because their range is already strong, right? So the problem here is we're just going to be outpipped. We just want to choose hands that can outpip them. Ace jack suited, ace queen suited, king queen suited. And this hand isn't going to do it. What's going to end up happening here is we're going to just end up going multi-way a lot of the time.
Yeah, because
the original opener is going to call. It's going to bring in the cutoff. And now we're playing out of position with kind of a shit hand.
In this linear spot, what's the worst hand you're taking as a squeeze?
Ace queen off plus, ace jack suited plus, pocket nines plus. If they're a little bit on the wider side, we can adjust that down.
Okay.
So we get called in one spot, the original opener. Flop comes queen jack 3. You decide to check. I'm on board with the check. He checks it back. Turn is a king. At this point, you decide to come out and bet half pot. Walk me through it.
Board on the flop is super wet and dynamic. I don't think he's checking back, queen X, straight draws, flush draws. So I think that eliminates a lot of the stronger hands in his range. I think it's worth stabbing now to get folds from hands like, nines, eights, ace 5 suiteds, hands like that. And then, if he calls our small size, we can evaluate the river and potentially try to bluff.
I don't think this size is good. If we just breathe on the pot, pocket 7s, pocket 8s, pocket 9s are folding. If he checked back with a hand like jack 10 or ace jack, that hand's calling a lot more. So I just don't think this size really accomplishes much. Like, we either go big here to target the jack X, the check back that's planning on calling one street, or we go really small here and just be efficient and fold out pocket 9s, right? I think this size is like 2 in between. Doesn't really accomplish much. He calls rivers and ace. We make top pair. Guess we've got some showdown value. Kind of a tricky spot to bluff because like right now his ace jack makes 2 pair. We chose the big size on the turn, so pocket 9s are folding. He just got a lot of 2 pair, a lot of straights. I see why you decided just to give up. I have no problems with the river. I think just the turn sizing is the precision can be dialed in just a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm with it.
All right, pre-flop, Jonathan. We gotta get the pre-flop dialed in. We get an open, a call, and a squeeze from king 6. Like just really quickly here, when we're squeezing, linear, upper left-hand portion of the hand balloon chart. So what ends up happening, of course, we get called here in 2 spots. We decide to start a 0 equity bluff here on the flop. The board pairs, we go small, so he'll raise off all his trips, right? And then we jam on this river. And what did he end up calling with on this river? What did he have?
Pocket 5s.
Here is the point, man. Why are we not putting in all the money on these boards when we have value?
It's a skill issue, I guess.
Yeah, we've seen a couple examples, right? Where like the board pairs, you have a pretty strong hand, you don't think they're full, and then we go like 2/3 pot on the river, right? And now in this hand, we overbet, we jam on the river, and he calls with pocket 5. It just shows like, I think the value sizes can be much bigger. We're missing out on a lot of value based upon what I'm seeing so far. And the pre-flop really just needs to be dialed in. When we squeeze, we're just gonna see a flop so much. So let's just go linear pre-flop. This just shows like when villains are capped and inelastic, maybe the value sizes should be dialed to the moon. Yeah, Hold'em Manager can't show, but there's a $15 button straddle here. So let's just imagine there's a $15 button straddle. We open to 75. Button is going to call. Of course, he has ultimate last action, but it doesn't matter. The button straddle is going to call. We're going heads up with the guy who has the straddle here. Flop comes ace 10-4. You decide to check. I like it. Big fan of checking my range out of position because recreational players tend to overstab, telegraph their sizing. So he checks it back. Turn, give me your thoughts here on this turn. You decided to bet 200.
Yeah, so I think when he checks back, I mean, hands that they trap on the monotone board is the nut flush. So when we have that blocker, they can't have it, and that makes me just want to start overbetting now because they don't have any flushes when they check back. And I do think that there's still an inelastic portion of their range that they could be like, they did call last act and they could be pretty wide. They could have a hand like Jack of Spades 10. Hands like one pair with the spade that won't fold. Maybe they check back weak or ace X. It's a pretty good spot to bet big.
Categorize the board for me on the flop.
Very static.
Very static. What type of boards do players check back top pair the most?
The static boards.
So if he has a hand like ace jack, ace 9, ace 8 here, is he ever planning on folding the turn?
No, would mean we should bet much bigger and target that range.
The overbet's fine. I just think you can push it a little harder. Ends up happening, ace comes on the river. Walk me through the size on the river. What are we doing here?
This goes back to, my error on the turn where I'm not giving them as much ace X, and I was more thinking about those like 10X plus a spade type of hands. I think I fail to account for just how much ace X they actually check back on the flop.
You get to this river with king, queen of spades, and he flips over ace 8 suited. What size are you betting?
1,000.
So when we have a bluff, why are we not jamming?
I guess I felt a little uncomfortable in the moment to get it to flop. I think, looking back, it probably works, but I just didn't have, the full complete thought process to get to that point of saying, if we're not going to jam with value, we should probably jam.
Yeah. And I think just like making sure you ask that inverse question, because this size here on this river, like what are we getting to fold? Is Jack 10 folding for this size? So what are we what's the goal?
Attempting to target Jack 10, but
we've just seen in multiple hands where when the board pairs, do players get more sticky or less sticky?
They get more sticky.
If this guy flipped over like pocket 8s with a spade, I think you picked a pretty good size to target that hand to call. I don't think 10X ever folding for this size. And like, if we think going all in folds the ace 8, the ace 3, there we go. We have the bluff size. It's a little bit scary, right? The 3X pot on the river, it's a little bit scary. On every river, it's either a good spot to bet huge as a bluff or a good spot to bet huge for value. And you have to be calibrated by forcing yourself to ask that inverse question. Which spot is this? I think there's a couple alternate options here. And one option is just going a little bit bigger on the turn and then just jamming the river, just putting the money in on the river. Villain dependent, but I think this is going to be a lot more profitable option than choosing the 2/3 pot size on the river. I think we may get this through. The other option here is because we do have this insane stack depth, what happens if we check on the turn? What does he do with ace X on the turn if we check?
He does start betting it on the turn once we check.
What does he do with Jack 10 when we check?
Probably stabs.
And so by checking the turn, we can just maximize fold equity quite a bit. We choose the size. Ace Jack is going to call one time, maybe 4X, 5X. We don't go too egregious. This check raise turn gives us a lot more fold equity. And you know what? On this specific river, after check raising the turn, I may not run it. Maybe I think ace X is just never folding after calls the turn on this particular river, so I just give up. Maybe just consider, like, if we check raise the turn, this allows us to maximize fold equity. Really easy one here. We just got to clean up pre-flop again. We have a player who limps off a $200 stack, and then we ISO with king 8. When players limp from up front, are they planning on folding?
No, they're not.
I mean, the problem is like we're not going to have stack depth. There is no skill edge when someone starts with 4 big blinds. There's no skill edge. Like this is why I'd rather have a catheter stuck in my pee hole permanently than play MTTs, just because like the skill edge when we're playing at these stack depths effectively is like mitigated. Got to get this pre-flop stuff cleaned up. The pre-flop stuff is egregious, and you made 150K last year. You're making 150 bucks an hour, and you're still making these massive mistakes. I think that's a great sign.
Oh, this is an interesting one.
Yes, it is. So we're going to play a limped pot here with Queen 5, one of the best hands in all the poker. We check on the flop. I'm assuming here you're going for the check raise.
We obviously flop really well with this hand, and I think in a limp pot, there's just tons of fold equity to be had.
Go to the turn, and now you decide to come out and just bet big here on the turn. Walk me through this.
It's just bad. I mean, first of all, I don't actually think I'm betting big, like relative to the size of the pot. And I think check just is so much better. They become uncapped after this turn. They could have turned to 7. Checking allows them to telegraph their hand strength once again, and then the check raise just lets us play for much more versus, when we just go bet that to try to get something to fold, it's never going to work when the pot is this small.
I'm completely on board with what you said here. We bet, we come out, we bet on the river, and of course we get called. What does this guy have here?
I think Jack 8.
So I'm completely on board with the line you said, just checking again here on the turn. The nice thing about this check on the turn is like, first of all, like if it just checks through, we can just 3X pot the river and win 100% of the time. They'll let you know when they have a 7. If they just come out and bet 10, 15 or something on the turn, we just have carte blanche to check raise here all the time. We get more information, we maximize fold equity, and I think just like not considering all the options. It seems like you're coming to the right decision. Like you can look at the hands and objectively come to a really good decision after you play the hand. For some reason, there seems to be a little bit of disconnect between what's happening in game and what's happening after. So I think like what you really need to work on is time pressure. Giving yourself a 15-second shot clock, going over hands and just putting that time pressure on yourself to practice that repeatable thought process with the clock on. Your repeatable thought process is great. you have great thoughts. You make great decisions with no pressure. But when the pressure's on, it seems like you're getting rushed a little bit. It's not a thought process problem. It's just an execution problem is what we have. An inability to execute A-level decisions with the pressure on. Turn the clock on, give yourself 15 seconds on every street, and force yourself to make those decisions over and over and over again with the pressure on. Because like your thought process is good. It seems like in game when you're rushed, that's when you're screwing up.
I agree with that completely. And this is why the hand trainer is so good. Notes that I sent in the Google Doc are just me yelling at myself in this hand.
Yeah, pretty much. You could yell at yourself, so I don't have to. Gonna ISO 6-5. I mean, it's fine when just one player limps. We're gonna play a pot, heads up in position quite a lot here from the cutoff against a wreck, which is okay. Now we get 3-bet from the small blind, very small size. I would just be calling here. Flop comes ace 6-3. He checks it over, and you decide to stab small here. Walk me through your thought process.
I think he's 3-betting too tight, even with this small size. And so I think that range is still going to be, most of the time when he checks it, it's 9s, 10s, jacks. Maybe not the stronger ones, just because he might have gone a little bit bigger. But I think we want to bet a size that ensures that those hands stay in, we get value from them, and that we can bluff them later. Yeah, so just starting a bluff now and targeting those under pairs.
I'm on board. I do think we could, do we think pocket queens or jacks or something like that is checking to check fold to 1-bet?
There's definitely a threshold, but I think we can probably eke out a bit more.
Capped or uncapped?
They're capped.
Inelastic or elastic?
Inelastic to a point.
Yeah, so is queens checking here on this flop to check fold to 1-bet?
I don't think so, no.
I've got a musket. I'm putting a musket to your head and saying, Jonathan, you need queens to fold on this flop or I'm pulling the trigger. How big are you going? And by the way, for every $50 you go too big, you get 1 finger sawed off. How big are you going to get queens to fold?
I think if I go anything really over pot, they start to fold. We can pot it for sure.
So again, this is another one of these spots where they are relatively capped and relatively inelastic, right? Third time we've seen it. Just choose a bigger size. We go to the turn. He checks. You decide to check back. Walk me through this.
I'm actually pretty happy with this. I mean, with what we're targeting on the flop where they have those under pairs, I think they start to fold now to a lot of sizes. I do think it's worth thinking about, the hands that are like queens with the diamond that will call, but I think it looks like I have an ace to a recreational player when I check back this turn. And if they have the hands that I'm talking about, like 10s through queens, they will tell us what they have on the river by checking or betting small, and then we can take it then, and it'll be pretty credible because it looks like we are playing a hand like an ace would play.
So you decide to check back on this turn. Just devil's advocate here. You said, which I found interesting, he's going to tell you what he has on the river. Because you were pretty sure about his range when he checked the flop. There's going to be queens, jacks, 10s, stuff like that. Why do we need him to tell us what he has on the river? Hasn't he already told us by checking on the flop?
Yes.
On this turn, capped or uncapped?
They're capped.
Now, are they elastic or inelastic?
They're elastic.
We can just choose the size on this turn to target the hands like jacks with the diamond or 10s with the diamond or something like that. Maybe a little bit smaller. Maybe like a half pot size on this turn because they're starting to get more elastic. We don't need to worry about leaving the big boy bet behind on the river because we just don't think he has the big boy hands. If you check back on the turn, you're just missing out on a street of value from queens, jacks, 10s. They're going to call one more time.
150. Yeah.
And we're not really worried about running into brick walls all that often. So you check back. Then on the river, he comes out and bets 225. Walk me through what you're thinking now.
I mean, the whole plan, we get to the river and they're going to tell us what they have. And now they come out and tell me what they have. And they're saying that I was wrong with what they had. They're not going to come out and bet, queens, jacks, 10s for this size. We should just fold. I don't think, this looks like they probably try to trap with a hand like ace king or maybe even aces. And for some reason, we still decide to bluff. But I think that's pretty egregious.
Yeah, so this is the bank robber analogy. You've heard it. Just so for the people who haven't heard it, the bank, this is like you walk into a bank, man's wearing a nice suit, has a Rolex on, has a briefcase. You're like, oh, there's the businessman. And the man puts on a ski mask and the briefcase opens and he's got an AK-47. Well, this is no longer a businessman. This man is robbing the bank. So we thought in this hand that this guy had 10s, jacks, queens, right? We thought he was a nice businessman. He was checking, he was letting us know. Now he comes out on the river and he bets 225 on an ace high board where the flush completes into 330. Are 10s, jacks, queens doing this ever? No, he's robbing the bank, man. He's robbing the bank. In your plan, which to give you credit, you check back the turn so you could let him show you what he had on the river. I just would have gone for it. I just would empty the clip. I said, this guy never has ace X. He never has ace king, ace queen, pocket aces when he takes this line. To your credit, you gave yourself an escape hatch. And now he's like, Jonathan, I'm letting you off the hook and you decided to jam.
I did. And I think I would have been better off just lighting my money on fire because this will never work. Robbed the bank and then we handed him the money from the bank. We didn't even put up a fight.
Yeah, you assisted. What do you have?
Ace king.
Ace king, yeah, makes sense. bunch of limps. We ISO raise with queen 10. I mean, this is a much better hand to ISO. We're gonna choose a hand to ISO raise. Like we're getting there. Like still not the strongest hand in the world. May just check behind, but I mean, at least we got a suited Broadway. If we are gonna raise here, just go bigger.
Yeah,
make this 100.
I think.
So we go to a flop. You decide to check. The villain checks back. Walk me through your decision here on the flop.
Yeah, so I do like the idea of coming out and betting with our thick value, but I think this hand's just a little bit too weak to try to start betting now. So I do like still just checking. I don't hate a bet here either, but I think checking is a little bit better.
Okay, so we check. You come out and just bet on the turn, 175, and we get 2 folds. I just want to talk about the flop really quickly. So I want to talk about why I might be a fan of just coming out and betting here. Let's say we come out here and bet. Under the gun player folds, and this guy in the small blind calls. We can just play for stacks against this guy, right?
That's great.
Like we can play for stacks against him always. If the villain here calls, we just check on the turn. And if he checks back the turn, we have the best hand all the time. If he bets the turn small, we have the best hand all the time. And if he comes out and pots it or bets 300 on the turn, we can just fold, right? So we still have clairvoyance on the turn. They still tell us what they have on this particular flop. Going back to the flop here, when there's one player in position, one player out of position, is this board going to be stabbed more than half the time? Is this guy from under the gun going to stab 50% plus of the time here on this board?
No, he's not.
Probably not, right? So I'd just be much more inclined to come out and bet here. Check if this guy calls, and just put the money in if this guy calls. All right, Jonathan. We get an open, we get a 3-bet, and we go for the cold 4-bet. I don't think there's any way you're going to convince me here, but you could try.
I'm not going to try. This is awful.
Yeah, we just want to go pure linear, and like I'd probably just be going.
We're not even deep.
I mean, in this spot, I'd probably be going jacks plus.
Yes.
Like ace queen suited, jacks plus. Pure linear. Players are under 3-betting. We're not even deep. We're not going to have stack depth. Like just choose the good hands. Fold everything else. I know it's pretty. Just fold, please. We're going to get called, and you decided to check here. Walk me through what you're thinking. He checks back.
If he has an overpair, he's going to bet. If he has, you know, the ace king, ace queen, he's going to check. And then if he checks, we win. If he has ace king here and he bet the flop, I'd be kind of surprised.
What does your hand look like when you 3-bet and then check on this flop?
It looks like ace king. My hand looks like ace king.
Do players overstab or understab when check 2 in a heads up pot?
They overstab.
One of the heuristics I've been really dialing in on is I believe in 4-bet pots. The players make more betting mistakes than they make calling mistakes. And the reason why I'm kind of leaning into that more and more is because the pot is already big. And so when you start piling in money, what hand do they put you on?
They put me on aces or kings.
And when you check, what hand do they put you on?
They put me on ace king.
Pot's big. What do they want to do?
They want to win.
Yeah, they want to just take it down. And whether they have ace king or whether they have pocket 10s, they just want to take it down. They don't want anything else to happen. They just want to take it down. I think the players relative to like equilibrium are actually overstabbing here, even with hands like ace king and ace queen, because when you check, your hand looks like ace king or ace queen. And so my default on these low boards is just a big stab. I may just come out and bet 200 here, because what's really nice about betting 200 is we make sure we fold ace king, ace queen right now. And when we have jack 10, that is pretty damn good for us. And if he calls, well, obviously the pot's going to be 720. We've got forfeit. We just shut it down. But getting the ace king to fold right now, whereas if we check, sometimes the ace king and ace queen checks back. Sometimes it checks back. Maybe it stabs 30, 40, 50% of the time. Maybe ace king with the ace of diamonds or ace king with the king of diamonds. That's really shitty for us if we could just bet big and get that stuff to fold right now.
If they do stab those ace king, ace queen, they're also obviously stabbing, you know, the overpairs. There's going to be a sizing difference between those two categories of hands.
I think in a 4-bet pot, there's not really a sizing difference.
So
and my reasoning behind that is because the pot is already big and the stack depth behind is small. And so I think what ends up happening is they just, with the ace king, ace queen, they just stab big once and then maybe give up. Maybe double barrel, maybe give up. But I wouldn't really infer sizing tells as much in a 4-bet pot, nearly as much as I would in a single raise pot.
Because I kind of want to shove versus a small stab and then just check fold versus, because if he has 10s here, he's just going to jam. Like he's just terrified of getting sucked out on. If he has a hand like ace king and he bets, I don't think he's going to use a very big size.
Yeah, I may push back on that just a little bit. Ace king wants to just take it down right now. And I think they let fear guide that. Whereas in a single raise pot, they don't have this concern of like, the pot's already huge, I need to take it down right. So they just monkey stab small with ace king in a single raise pot. They're just like, not a good hand, let me just stab one time, you know, see what. In a 4-bet pot, they want to end this right now. This is pain. Their heart is beating down their chest. They're nervous. Fear is guiding their decisions. They have ace king. They want it to end. They want it to end right now, so they stab big. I don't think players really telegraph their hand strength with their sizing in 4-bet pots. So I may just stab big here. Yeah, so as played here, we turn the nuts. Walk me through your sizing here on this turn.
It's bad. He's checked back, and you know, even though we said he'd probably stab with ace king, ace queen, once he checks back, like he's not checking back an overpair on the flop, so he has to have, you know, those ace high hands. This is not the size to target those hands. I think we should either bet very, very small or or check and try to let him stab at it.
Yeah, I'm completely on board there. I think both of those are viable options. If he did check back with a hand like ace queen or ace king or something like that, we check again on the turn. What's he gonna do if we bet?
Oh, when we bet, he's gonna fold.
So what might he do if we check here?
He might bet.
So like either way, when we bet, we're getting ace king, ace queen to fold. So like we may as well just try to give him a little bit of rope, pray that he bluffs, right? So either like betting a size that's so disrespectful that like induces him to spaz sometimes, like $50 or $75 or something, or just checking here and giving him the green light to bluff with the ace king and the ace queen without a diamond that check back on the flop sometimes. And then like if they do stab the turn, don't put the money in, just call and let them continue. They may not bluff enough on the river, they may not double barrel enough, but they're sure as shit not calling a big bet. They're sure as shit not calling a check raise. They just, I mean, the one thing I will say here where I am on board with you is like, they don't check back tens, jacks, queens on this flop. The best hand they have here is just not going to be able to face heat. So we either need to give them rope or bet egregiously small. All right, my biggest notes for you. Number one, pre-flop should just be squeezing more linear. We're probably just isolating too wide. We're probably 3-betting and 4-betting too wide. Just need to clean up pre-flop and be tighter, specifically when we are not super deep, and particularly when we're against multiple players who are just going to call a lot with hands that dominate us. Just need to clean up pre-flop and be tighter if you really want to keep that $150 edge in California. Number two, really need to dial in specifically when villains are capped and inelastic. This is the time to use these big boy sizes with value. And if we're on the turn and they're capped and inelastic, we should be using the big size with the bluffs and the value because we have the same goal, right? We want to carry them to the river with as much money as possible in the pot. And then on the river, we get them to fold with the bluffs, we get them to call with the value. When they're capped and inelastic on the turn, doesn't matter if we have bluff or value, big size. Sizes in general, when they're capped and inelastic, from what I saw, way too small. And then on the river, when they're capped and inelastic, like our value size, we're just missing out on an egregious amount of value. Next would be not always considering all the options. There's just a few situations where I saw where like you didn't consider one more check or didn't consider going for a check raise. Really forcing yourself to hone in on those decisions. And I think the way to do that, number four, which we talked about, giving yourself that time pressure, because when we're talking here, when you're giving me notes, your thoughts are dialed in. You're making great decisions, but in game, for whatever reason, when the clock is on, when the time pressure is there, your decisions aren't always optimal. And I feel like just forcing yourself to simulate that environment with a 15-second, 20-second shot clock when you are studying is going to be the way to improve your execution. Overall, you are one of the stronger players I've worked with. I do believe that you can carry that $150 an hour over to California and make very good six figures in California, climb up to 10, 20, 20, 40, whatever. A few things you need to patch. And I would say like over the next 6 months, if you can knock these things out, there's nothing holding you back from making 200, 250K a year in California playing poker full time. All right, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video, and seeing how we patched Jonathan's leaks helps you turn into the biggest boy possible. Thank you guys, and have a gentle